Thank you. That picture's old. The job ages you. 9 years old to this day. Good, afternoon, everybody. How's everyone? All right, I hear I have 20 odd minutes here. This usually takes 40, so I'm gonna go super fast. And hopefully you're gonna see some themes with some of the other speakers. I know I did. So I have only been at FedEx for 9 years and 1 week. That is unusual because most of the team that I work with are lifers. So FedEx decided to centralize their sourcing and procurement organization. They actually did it in late 2012. I came a year later. First time I left Connecticut for a job. So I could say, good morning, y'all. Some people think I'm from Memphis, but I'm really a Yankee. Just spend a few hours with me and a couple of cuss words later, and you'll know where I'm from. So let's go ahead. I don't have a clicker, actually, unless it's here. There it is. Okay, so why did FedEx hire an outsider? Well, wonderful, wonderful people, 500,000 employees worldwide, but FedEx is a very proud legacy. They will do anything for each other, but when you have folks that have been there a long, long time, sometimes it's difficult to make a huge, huge change, and this certainly was. So the basic mission was to, of course, leverage the buy across FedEx Ground, Freight, Express, Office, Services, and the corporate office. Category management, a term they were not familiar with. No one had explained what that was. It wasn't very contemporary. We had strategic sourcing people doing really tactical procurement. So the focus on that was absolutely key. Procurement operations grew up. When you grow up in an independent operating company format, you don't have optimal procurement operations, so that was certainly key. Our mission was to provide best-in-class service to these operating companies, and as you can imagine, in late 2012, early 2013, the guy or gal that they were able to go tap on the shoulder, get me a purchase order, I've already figured it all out, that was kind of not the deal anymore, so that got folks a little probably concerned. So we needed to make sure that the service we gave them was better than what they had before. We want to be a customer of choice for our suppliers. Now, coming from aerospace, where I spent 29 years, that was an odd concept. But people actually tell us they like working with us as a customer. And oh, by the way, 95% of my top 100 suppliers are also customers, so that makes it fun. You got to behave, right? And we want to be a career destination of choice for our talent. We decided there are 4 key pillars that everything else fit under: category management, data analytics, project management, and emotional intelligence, the most important one on there. The purple promise is I will make every FedEx experience outstanding. We believe it, we breathe it, we try to live it every day. And we felt all of this would give us competitive advantage. Here is just this long list of things we buy. Everything's indirect at FedEx. We deliver to you your package and all the logistics services. So this is a list of what my team buys. I don't buy airplanes, jet engines, or avionics. Very ironic because that's where I grew up. But just about everything else that the company needs, we buy. It's, depending on the price of fuel, between about $15 and $17 billion a year. That is for my team. You mentioned the disbursements organization, which I inherited 3 years ago, disperses a whole lot more than that because it includes customer refunds and legal, all the other things that might not be considered a category. So this is what we buy, and a lot of them. One of the first things I did by day 90, I went into the CFO's office and I talked to him about what I felt and what my team felt and what my experience told me were the characteristics of a world-class organization. And then I was cheeky enough to give ourselves a grade, and as you could see, it wasn't very good. His reaction, I misunderstood. He basically said, my head almost exploded when I saw this. And so I remember thinking to myself, well, 90 days to getting fired, that's gotta be a record, right? Guess I'll go back to Connecticut and, I don't know, work in a bookstore or garden or something, right? I was 50 years old back then. So I went relatively sure if it didn't work out that I wouldn't be homeless. But still, a scary moment. And he saw the look on my face and he said, you misunderstood me. Nobody has given me that kind of transparency in the first meeting. And I like that about you, and I want you to keep doing it. And so we did. I have learned, begin with the end in mind. I spent years as a continuous improvement manager and teacher in my old role besides doing procurement. So this was an honest assessment of where we were. Red, yellow, green. Each of these 7 characteristics had 5 or 6 enabling initiatives behind them. For instance, in order to develop and proactively manage talent, we need to understand development plans of our people. We need to know where their strengths and weaknesses are. We need to understand what they need to do to get to that next level. We have talent reviews every December, 3 days, exhausting. 200 people we review, down to hourly people in disbursements, so that we can understand positioning and succession planning, things like that. So today is a little outdated. That today is from a couple of years ago. It's still greenish, but there's more to do. There's digitization to do. There's streamlining our processes, which there weren't many to begin with to do category management, strategic sourcing, so we built it using our own tools. We didn't go spend millions of dollars and hire 100 people. We built it with what we had. Now it's the time to probably get a little more digital on that as well, and that's underway. This is just a smattering of the key initiatives to make those red and yellow dots turn green. There was a lot we had to build. We were a PeopleSoft house. We are we're worldwide and implementing this year in the US cloud financials from Oracle. That will streamline P2P process, but not really the strategic sourcing piece. So we still have a wonderful suite of tools that we've built ourselves, but we've got to knit them together, in my opinion, with workflow. So more to go here. Having a university developed, I didn't hire a curriculum writer, I didn't hire teachers, we wrote it ourselves. What I found is that everyone got the same training regardless of where they were on their career, and that really didn't work too well. So it's a couple of examples of some of the things that we did. The Supplier Relation Management Center of Excellence, it's a mouthful. Basically, I pulled 6 people out of the ranks of our sourcing management team and made them the technical homeroom for all things SRM. Supplier scorecards, category strategy guidelines, business continuity, disaster recovery plans. We felt that it was really important to have that kind of standard work. And so that was really, really helpful, and that group still exists today, but they're small. That also includes supplier diversity and sustainability. And my rule is you go into that group for a few years and then you come out and you go back to the buying floor and you live with what you created, and it keeps it real for us. Because FedEx has been, I'm going to use the past tense, fiercely independent operating companies, that is changing as we speak. There is a whole lot more collaboration among operating companies today than there was even 3 years ago. That makes our lives easier. But we have had to develop our value proposition in a way where people want to use the enterprise deals that we negotiate. And in the past, there's been a lot of people that have a vote to say no, and that makes it difficult. So we place a high level on stakeholder engagement and alignment. It will get even better, though, I believe, because we are understanding that we have to collaborate more to keep our costs down and to be more profitable, and we play right in the middle of that, which is wonderful. So when we have a material sourcing project, we follow a strict governance. We charter it with signature of the stakeholders, so instead of the Monday morning quarterbacking that you get after you did the deal, these guys are in on the beginning of it, right? We scope out the initiative, we put down risks, deliverables, milestones, who's in, who's out, what's in scope, what's out, and we pace that every 2 weeks. We have updates all the way through execution, in which we have what we call a value capture form that all those stakeholders sign, right? So that has been very, very helpful. On average, my team has done about $200 million a year of save, right? It may not seem a lot relative to our spend, but fuel, which is $4 to $5 billion a year, we do not hedge. We buy that based on an index. Of course, we have contracts in place, so when you think about addressable spend, we take that right off the top. The category management approach that we took, I stole this and made this slide from a wonderful Hackett article from, 2015, 2016, that really beautifully described the difference between procurement, sourcing, and CAP management. So our procurement folks were feeling like second-class citizens in the first year because they didn't get to do the strategic thing. They had to do the tactical procurement and program management thing. But the reason for that was because we needed a lot of good execution there, and if everybody tried to do everything, it just wasn't going to work. My procurement teams and sourcing teams come under different managers but the same director, which makes it helpful, and they have to work hand in hand with folks. The procurement folks may not be at the negotiating table when we're doing a big enterprise deal, but they certainly have input to it because they have to execute that and live with it. So we see a difference with the three, but we had to create, and in our university, a whole course around category management, and this is what we include. I call it the circle of life or the circle of something else if it's not going well. The single thing that I think got folks understanding back in 2014 if they wanted to be part of the new world or not was making them create these. One of my earlier career folks said it was like a culminating experience in graduate school, right? Not everyone was comfortable with it, not everyone was good at it. We spent about a year and a half refining it and having people present it over and over and over again. And it freaked some people out. But once they got it, because we want to have category expertise, right? That's one of the best-in-class characteristics. You got to know this stuff. You're managing hundreds and hundreds of millions of spend. You better be the best at it, right? But we continue to refine it as we go, and these are just some of the chapters in the book, as I call it. You might think it's a little odd to see the purchase-to-pay tactical piece in it, but my thought was that we have a lot of waste in our process with how we buy what we buy. And we found that that's to be true. So I may have a MRO category, right? Maintenance, repair, operational supplies. And if I don't have them loaded up in a catalog that's self-service with the suppliers plumbed in the back end, then I'm probably wasting a lot of manpower sitting there putting out orders. So we wanted for each category to know how you buy what you buy, including who you buy it from. Our cost savings approach, and this was a big deal. We get a reputation for just lowest price, right, even now. And we basically said, listen, there's 5 ways or more of providing value. And so when we have a material strategic sourcing project launched and chartered, this is part of what our team has to fill out. Which lever are you pulling? And then you've got to get into some detail, right? So you can read them here. One of the more interesting things I found was the work around rationalizing spec. Take janitorial services. You don't think it's a big deal. Well, how about if you don't have a standardization for what's a small, medium, or large facility? What if you don't have a standardization for what's clean? Just didn't think about that, right? But what's clean to one guy dictates the statement of work for the supplier. Well, how do you go to market with regional and national guys if you have 300 different standards, right? So sometimes, and that's the harder negotiation for us anyway, the supplier ones are easy compared to that, but getting our stakeholders to agree on what is the spec we're going to market with, right? So that's a huge, huge one for us in some areas. And then the traditional ones, more spend under your deal, getting rid of the rogue spend, and then, process costs is big as well. I typically focus at this point on one of the holes I saw in the process, at least in the supply chain within FedEx, and that was supplier risk management. And what I told my team is, after 29 years in the aerospace industry, every bad thing that's happened with a supplier has happened to me. And they think I made it up. And they think I made up the stories, but basically, supplier's facility burning down. Private-owned supplier, the old man dies, and the 6 kids are selling the equipment, and one of the kids is estranged from the rest and calls you and said, you may want to go get your U.S. government Black Hawk tooling out of the warehouse before they sell it. I worked for Sikorsky Aircraft, Pratt & Whitney, Hamilton Sunstrand, and the corporate office there. Those are real stories. We've had suppliers back in the day at the other company go bankrupt, and you read about it in the Wall Street Journal. That's not fun, especially when your CPO calls you and says, Ms. Spence, did you know your supplier just closed their doors? Not how you want to find out about it, right? So in that vein of every bad thing that's happened, I think has happened to me, worst case scenario planning. So we spend a lot of time talking about, okay, we have 30,000 suppliers, but really there's 100 of them that we think could shut us down, and it's going to hurt. And so we went about trying to understand, how do we segment our supply base, right? This was really, really important for us. I have met people that have said, I have 7,000 suppliers and I risk manage all of them. And I say, BS. There's no way, unless you got an army, you're going to do that. So we do our best to evaluate what the impact inputs are and the disruption probability. Let me give you an example. Jet fuel. If you run out, you don't fly planes, you don't have a business, okay? I have 150 jet fuel suppliers all over the world. I have single source situations in only a couple of places in the world. One of them is Memphis. We burn 1 million gallons plus a night. There's not enough trucks. The trucks would ruin the roads. So you depend on the pipeline, you're depending on barges when the pipeline has an issue, and we're dependent on a wonderful supplier who works their backsides off to make sure we never run out. But back in 2014, there was a critical failure at a refinery, and it basically brought us down to a very uncomfortable level of fuel, right? And so from that near miss, I'll call it, we developed this entire process about figuring out who to worry about, and then what do you do? So we segment our suppliers. A guy in the lower left, purple, might be office supplies. Love our office supply guys, but that's probably not going to shut down my business, right? So we have segmented, and we've got between 95 or 100 suppliers on the cube, as I call it. When you're on the cube, you get some special love, right? You're going to have a scorecard. We're going to have contract language in there about protecting us. And we're going to monitor you both for financial and operational and other, things going on in the world. It's a lot of work, a lot of work. We have just started almost a year ago to now look at tier 2 supplier risks. So those 95 or so key suppliers that could hurt us really badly if something happens, we are now having them roll out their supplier risk management program or tell us what they've got that's better than we have. I'm open to it. Remember hearing about the Colonial Pipeline in the United States in May, right? There was an attack, a cyber attack on that pipeline. Well, fuel flows through a pipeline. Guess how many of our suppliers listed the pipeline as a key critical risk? 0, right? So that was a wake-up call. We have wonderful suppliers, and they're working very hard with us to put their own business continuity and disaster recovery plans in place, because if I can't be made comfortable and you're one of those 95 critical guys and you're a sole source, I'm obligated to go get another source, aren't I? And they don't want that, right? I don't have many sole source situations, thank goodness. But this has been really, really key for us. We will not stop the bad thing, but we will survive it if we mitigate well, right? Sometimes with our suppliers, it's just enough for us to pick up the phone and say, what's going on? Your financial stress score is through the roof. What's happening? And they talk to us. I think there's one that maybe did not talk to us, and we basically just developed another source, moved away, and that was that. So we have all sorts of monitoring tools we use. There's a lot of great financial monitoring tools out there. Operational risk is a little harder, right? If a supplier has 3 facilities where they're making the product that we buy, I'm going to want to know if that one burns to the ground tomorrow, how long before you have the other one up and running, right? And if it's 6 weeks, then what's your inventory level? I mean, to me, that's very common sense, but it wasn't things that our team had been asking in the past, so that's been key. Business continuity, disaster recovery guidelines, we don't formally approve of them. I don't want any legal responsibility, but we give them the guidelines that we use on them, and we ask them to think about using the same with their suppliers. So I want to know what your BCDR says about your legal risk, your operational risk, your financial risk, right? And so the suppliers, the 95, will give those to us, we'll score them, and we actually have a line item on our scorecard which talks about the robustness of their BCDR. Again, it's only as good as what they tell us, so there's an honor system here, but we're asking. And if we have enough red flags going off, financial health scores going off in a bad way, we're not getting information from them on their BCDR or it's weak, I'm going to think about maybe I need another guy in there, right? And if we're honest and have those conversations, it usually will move them. The supplier relationship scorecard, I think I said when I came in, maybe I didn't, when I came in 9 years ago, I didn't ask for one dime or one person. And the outgoing executive said, if you don't get another 80 people, you will fail spectacularly. Did not listen, didn't add one person, we blew away every goal. We waited a year, I wanted to see what I had, right? Got to really evaluate what you had. This SRM scorecard was a spreadsheet, right? I'm a fan of spreadsheets in the beginning. You can make it fancy, digitize it, and automate it certainly later, but start with something, for God's sake. It would usually be what we talked about. We let our suppliers help decide what the goal was. That was important. If we wanted a 99.9% delivery on an item and they were at 98, it might be good enough. It depends, right? So we had a session in 2014. We started these scorecards, and every year we go through a process of reevaluating goals. Are they hard enough? Are they good enough? Are there any missing? So we talk about who's responsible for the metric. Sometimes the supplier has to give us the metric, right? Meaning the metric attainment. We're very clear what's the frequency, what's the goal, and then we compare last year versus this year. We have a bronze, silver, gold, platinum, right, level, and we do not share other supplier scorecards with competitors, but if I have 4, for instance, I might say, you're the only one that's bronze. The other 3 guys are silver and gold. I hate that. Gets them moving, right? So we'll do that as well. A little competitive nature is okay. The Insight dashboard, we're talking about digitization. My favorite story about the work that the teams did to put together category strategies or look at their scorecards or look at their supplier sustainability and diversity, 11 different systems open, and if you had an hour in the day to give them to go analyze what they had to do to run their desk, 59 minutes of it was scrubbing and translating data and strangulating data. So we have a wonderful small business systems team that developed an Insight dashboard, internet shopping, 3 clicks to where you want to go. So if I'm in the category of PCs and peripherals, or I'm in the category of vehicles or tires or sort equipment, I drill down and everything I need is in this dashboard. Again, we built it without adding a single person and adding any technology, because I think we have licenses to every damn thing that's out there. We just weren't using it, right? So that was a wonderful thing. And then finally, this is a made-up graphic of what my scorecard looks like, but for the first time, we developed a measurement system to measure our team. So I'm measuring my suppliers, but I'm able to say to my suppliers, well, we're getting measured too. And my performance objectives count on attainment of this scorecard. So what we decided, and there's many more internal metrics, but the ones that are outward facing that we show our stakeholders are, did we say what we told you we were gonna do? Are we on track for that? Every year in the spring, we do a formal customer survey to our internal stakeholders. You cannot, so if I think the team's great, I have 2 things that's gonna set me straight: the customer survey inside of FedEx and then my employee survey. So don't believe me just because I think we're wonderful and our scorecard says this. Those are two things that come in annually that can say, well, directionally you're okay, or you think you're wonderful, but your employees all want to leave and your customers hate you, right? That's on a bad day. Not happening, of course, it's pretty good, but people appreciate that we are treating ourselves like a service provider and wanting them to want us to work for them. That's real important. We have a ticketing system for stakeholder issues. I found our team was spending a lot of time picking up the phone, answering the same question over and over and over again. No one's writing it down. We didn't have a root cause for the thing that everyone's calling about, so we developed the system again in-house. For instance, we had a lot of complaints on the uniform program and found out that a new person coming on board at FedEx Freight wasn't getting what they needed to go out and do their job in the field because we didn't have an HR feed every day. It was once a week. Only when we developed the system, like, holy cow, we keep solving the problem over and over again, did we realize that's an easy fix, right? So one example there. Lots of other metrics here too, diverse spend. We have a huge amount of diverse spend for FedEx, women, minority, and small. Not everybody considers small diverse, but a lot of our customers are small businesses. We want to make sure that we are serving them and that our supply base looks like our customers. So we measure all three there. I think we did, the spend on that area is more than just what my team manages. So something like $17 billion last year. A lot of it small business. And finally, if you haven't read this book, The Inevitable, it'll hurt your head. You'll have to put it down a billion times. But I loved it because it talked about that one quote, technology is humanity's accelerant. This was really important for our team who got really nervous about automation about 3 years ago when we started doing RPA. And basically what I said is, listen, I can't go hire 100 more of you. I need to free you up, and I want to do that by automating and taking off your desk the things that are repeatable, and that can be done by a bot, for instance. And that frees you up, and it obligates us to upskill that workforce, which not everyone was comfortable with, frankly, at the time. But it's worked pretty well, more to do, and it's about really increasing the capacity and the capability of the workforce. I think that's it. Last slide. I have no idea how I did in time, but I think I nailed it, right? Okay. All right.
It looks like you easily could have carried on for another half hour there, Sue.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple of questions, actually. I've got one. You know, one of your early slides when you had the 7 sort of transformation elements,
yes,
and that sort of traffic light system that you put forward. Which of those was the hardest to turn green? Because one of them went a sort of yellowy color, so was that the hardest?
Yeah, there are 2. The hardest one was talent development, not because we didn't know how to develop talent, but because not everyone could get there. So I had quite a bit of turnover in the first 2 years because we were asking folks to do things they had never been trained to do, number one, or chose to do. So what was difficult about that is getting the right folks in the team, putting people in the right job, or encouraging them if there's something else at FedEx that they would rather do, and a number of people did that. The optimizing procurement was the hardest from a technical point of view because we had all these different systems. I mentioned we're going into Oracle ERP. We're live in the US as of December. It's the last region in the world. It's going to hugely help.
And you sort of touched on my next question in that answer there, but how did you win the hearts and minds of the staff and get them on board with this?
So I had a term that they didn't like, but I used it anyway, and I call it the BOBO. Anyone know what the BOBO might be? They were the back office of the back office. They were not very important, they didn't think. They were, of course. And so instead of being just an order taker, their careers were elevated. You are managing $400 million of railroad spend, $1 billion of fuel spend. If we can't do that job right, this company could be brought to their knees. And that was important for them to understand the responsibility and how valuable they were. And so for the folks that wanted that kind of growth, it was wonderful. There were some folks that didn't want that and kind of wanted to be in the BOBO. And those are the folks that went on and found a better suited job for them, frankly. But frontline versus, helping FedEx gain competitive advantage versus order taker in the back room was, the thing that got most people excited, right?
Yeah, I can imagine that. And, from a personal level, as a newcomer to the organization 9 years ago, how did you manage such a transformation being an outsider, if you will?
I think it was because I was an outsider. And same thing maybe early in my career. I didn't know what I couldn't do. I just assumed everything would work. And it was a little bit of, I won't call it naivety, but it was a little bit of, so what if it fails? To what end? So for me personally, I had just sent 2 kids off to college. My nest was empty. They left me. And then I get this call. It's like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And really, that was kind of my mantra is, what is the worst that can happen? You have $17 billion of spend to manage. The CEO and his entire strategic management committee have declared that this is a mandate. This is something critical, right? You're only going to go up from wherever you are, right? And so, what's the worst that could happen? Well, it might sound like a funny thing, but that's kind of how I felt. If you don't try, you're not getting there. The other thing, and that didn't play well with a lot of people or everybody, high expectations. I learned that with my kids. I expect you to bring home A's because you're smart. And I tell them the story, when I was in high school, my parents had 4 of us, and the older sister was the rebel, so I was below her. I snorkeled under the radar. Well, you expect that much, that's all you're going to get, right? I got pretty lazy until I went to college and found I didn't know how to study, and then I got my act together right quick. So with the team, it was, I think you can be at this level, and this is what we're going to try for, and if you get 75% of the way, they're great, right? So high expectations, but support with training, development, coaching. But no doubt about it, I have high expectations, I always have, and I don't come off of that. I think that's fine.
Okay, perfect ending. Brilliant session. Thank you so much, Sue, for joining us today.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sue.